Okay, now we're going live. And then we'll work on getting the presentation back up if you guys, want to start
Okay.
again.
Okay.
But we'll give it 1 second. We're going to get live and then confirm. We should be good. Shows that we're live. And we are. We have sound. We're good. We're good.
Okay. All right, we are back, and we are joined now by Supervisor Franklin has come to the meeting. So we were on page 10, but I know you can't get the materials up yet. But I know that Supervisor Walkinshaw had a question.
And I'm not sure which slide it is, but the one that has the map that
Yes.
has the cost, which actually. Obviously, $4.2 billion is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
But it's not, if you had told me 28 lines, I think I maybe would have come up with a higher number potentially. But one question I have is, does that cost, obviously they need to have dedicated right of way.
So there are
And
very
does it assume displacing existing travel lanes or acquisition of additional right of way?
that is a great set of questions. So the first one, I will say, not all of these routes were assumed to have dedicated lanes.
Okay.
Some of them, for example, the one that runs up I-95 is assumed to operate in the existing express lanes. No need to build its own thing. And we have several what we've called BRT Express that are operating on existing freeways or in existing managed lanes. There are a few others in places that just based on predicted congestion and things like that weren't deemed to, but we also work very closely with jurisdictional staff through NVTA's BRT planning working group to identify the places where they were considering those dedicated lanes. And so in some places, and we do have more details on a route by route basis, instead of full dedicated lanes, we've looked at things like transit signal priority and lanes at specific intersections where the delay is occurring, other ways that we can get that same speed and reliability improvement without necessarily the full lane.
So the cost is basically the least expensive way to get the speed and travel times you need.
Incorporating what jurisdictions may or may not already be planning. So in some instances, jurisdiction, planning for, say, the Duke Street BRT in the city of Alexandria is already fairly underway. We took what's in their plans as what they were planning to do, even if there may have been either a cheaper or a better way to do it, since this is what the city is planning to do.
Got it. And then
The second piece of your question, did you have?
no,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, because I've already forgotten the second piece of my question. What was it?
It's good because the second piece of your question has a less resounding answer. The question of whether we were assuming taking a lane or building new lanes. For the purpose of ridership forecasting and analysis of traffic impacts, we have not assumed that lanes are being repurposed from general purpose lanes to BRT lanes, although we recognize that this is a local decision for the jurisdictions, and that may be the case somewhere. In places where that happens, and there's less capacity for general traffic, you could actually see higher ridership because you decreased roadway capacity. So there's things there. For cost purposes, and again, these are very high level planning costs. We've used sort of peer agencies to calculate, what this might cost on a per mile basis. And we've incorporated some examples that have built additional lanes. So one of the peer examples we're using is the one BRT in Fairfax County, which, as we know, is building additional lanes, pedestrian facilities, all of that, and some that didn't. And while that at an individual route level may mean some routes are a little high and some routes are a little low, at the system level, potentially that has the ability to balance itself out.
And then on the operating costs, obviously a lot of these routes or some of them could take the place of existing bus service. So, for example, the Little River Turnpike,
Yeah.
there's existing probably Metro, Fairfax Connector, Dash service throughout that corridor that perhaps would be replaced,
Absolutely
generating
true.
savings. So is the 192, I assume, does not.
It does not, because we have not at this point in the planning efforts been able to identify where we'd be replacing, where we'd be dialing back, where. So that is true, and I'll point out that that's also the reason that we've pulled the maintenance facility cost out separately, because as you say, if we're pulling back some of the local service, some of those vehicles could be former local bus vehicles that are now going to be BRT storage facilities. So yes, there's a lot of flexibility in all of that, and that's excellent points.
Anyone
We
else
had
right now?
one
Oh,
here.
yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Supervisor.
it's for my clarification. So, is this similar to the long haul of someone that lives in Loudoun County and they go to one spot and then the bus would take them to Washington DC, but instead of that, it may take them to I don't know, to Prince William County or to Alexandria?
In a few examples, and in particular, some of the ones I mentioned earlier that we're talking about is BRT Express. So like the service up I-95 is a great example. They would be very similar in that regard, except they might be operating more frequently and a longer span of service. So operating on the weekends as well, operating in the midday, right? Providing real connection across the day. That again, on an individual route level, that may be reconsidered in the future, and that could change the operating costs. For the most part, though, these BRT service tends to look like a cross between express bus service and local bus service. So local bus service may have bus stops every half mile, quarter mile. BRT will generally have stops every mile or so, right? So you're removing some delay associated with stops, but you're also making people walk a little bit longer. And so there is some difference. Most of these routes operate in that sort of realm, right? Stops every mile, much more localized service, but not the same local bus service. We do have in the full packet that will come out in April, sort of details on each route and where the stops are and how that is operating for each route. So that will be part of those materials.
And so each jurisdiction will determine if they want to be a part of this process, or how are you all working with that?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so from NVTA's point of view, we want our eligible member jurisdictions who are interested in seeking funding for these sorts of projects to kind of look at this information and where their priorities match this system, then the information will help them develop funding requests to NVTA. But if a jurisdiction simply doesn't want to do it because it's not their highest priority, then it potentially will just sit in the plan until such time as it becomes a priority. Or indeed, we may look, as Stalia has shown, there are some routes that will have lower ridership, which through 2045 just may not be viable routes relative to other routes. So we want to be supportive to our member jurisdictions who are looking to deploy these sorts of systems and providing the information to help them through that process.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay.
Continue.
Go to slide 11. And because I love a good transition, I'll just add on to what Keith was saying in that one more, Harun, if you don't mind. Sure. Is while each jurisdiction certainly will have the opportunity to decide if and how and when they're implementing their routes, there are some of these operational and policy considerations that need to be considered at a regional level, right? And so we have also been looking at a number of which you guys have already brought up tonight, but impacts to the local bus systems, right? Where should we be changing routes, changing frequencies, those pieces, the customer and maintenance facility needs that may need to be coordinated across the region for a system of this size, or at the very least with the local operators who are currently operating service. A wide range of technologies, both for the operation of BRT, but also customer-facing technologies, and really making sure that those customer-facing pieces are unified across the region so that they're easy to use. And then, of course, funding will be necessary both at a local level and at a regional level, and governance is an issue we're looking at as well. So not necessarily making hard recommendations about any of these things, but really highlighting the need to plan for this as a holistic system for Northern Virginia.
Do you have a question, Supervisor Walkinshaw?
Yeah, just,
Go ahead.
this is probably the kind of question that you hate because it's like kind of hypothetical, but we're in terms of the funding question, I'm curious, are there any kind of consistent things that you would see when you just from like NVTA's funding and scoring process, right? If you were to match a BRT project against a widening project, right? So take Little River Turnpike, right? So if you were to put a BRT, that BRT with whatever cost estimate you had there next to a widening of that same stretch of Little River Turnpike, congestion reduction, cost. I probably shouldn't have mentioned a specific one, but because I don't want you to expect you to be able to answer that, you'd have to look at them. But can these BRT projects be competitive in terms of NVTA's funding process versus more traditional widening projects?
I'll chime in. So the Richmond Highway BRT project scored very well. If we include the widening, we are invested to the tune of a little over or a little at $500 billion. So and I said $1 million, but what I will note, that project scored very well. Even when you came back for funding, and this is just the BRT section, not the widening component. When you came back for additional funding, and then at that time you told us, okay, the costs have gone up since you last applied, it still scored very well.
It's a ridership projection.
Ridership, the scope and scale of the project, the additional costs that were needed didn't move the needle to reduce congestion, or I shouldn't say to make your congestion reduction score go lower. The project still performed very well.
So if it's a high ridership BRT project, it can score well versus relative to a widening project.
And as part of our evaluation, right, we did try to align these measures that we're looking at with the 6-year program evaluation criteria, but also with some of the criteria for other major funding sources, in particular capital investment grants, CIG through FTA, which has historically been a big funding source. So making sure that those things align so that if your jurisdiction is looking at making a funding request at moving these forward, you have an idea of how well positioned you might be for some of those funding programs.
Okay. All right, please continue.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna let Keith start this one off. Actually.
Thank you. So uncertainty is the bane of transportation planners' life. We're making forecasts out to the year 2045. Quite a few of our numbers are rounded intentionally because we don't want to imply a position which is not consistent with the robustness of modeling 20 years into the future. So the way we generally deal with uncertainty in long-range transportation planning, and we also do this for transaction, our long-range plan, is to develop scenarios where we can test different futures and see how our what we call standard forecasts compare against these different scenarios. So when we develop scenarios, it's very important to remember that we're not predicting these scenarios are going to happen, and we're not expressing any preference that we want them to happen. They're simply intended to be something that is plausible, but different to what the COG forecasts would lead to. And in doing that, we can really just test the robustness and the sensitivity of different assumptions on our results. So if the results are varying widely, then that gives us some pause that there's some great sensitivity here and what's causing, say, a small change to have a big difference in the modeling results. But equally, if whatever we do in terms of trying different scenarios still leads us to forecast which is similar to our standard forecast, then we can be pretty confident that this is robust. So Dinah's going to walk you through, or actually might jog you through, given the time, our 3 scenarios that we've applied here and what we found when we did that.
So we looked at, as promised, we're getting to these, right? 3 different scenarios. One is looking at a post-pandemic new normal. The second is looking at BRT-oriented land use, so making some changes to land use assumptions. And the third is looking at some transportation incentives and pricing. We have, very quickly, I'll try and go over some of the key assumptions in each of these. For those of you who were involved in the transaction process, this first one, this post-pandemic new normal, will look very familiar. And the focus here is really on consideration of long-term continuation of travel trends that were observed during the pandemic. For the record, the models that we used to do this were never really properly updated to account for that big shift in telework that happened in the pandemic. And so they never really accounted for that moving into the long term. This allows us to look at that and to understand sort of how that might impact things. Recognizing, of course, that we now have, return to work and different things, but this can give us a range of no telework, some telework, to understand that. So big assumptions are there's increased telework, particularly for higher income folks who are office workers who are able to do that. We also see a decrease in some of the other work-based trips. So if you don't go into the office, you also maybe don't go to lunch from the office. Things like that, and some replacement of shopping trips with at-home deliveries, which seems to be sticking around no matter how much we go back to the office. Because of this, what we see in this scenario is actually less travel, right? Fewer people are going to work, fewer people are going places. We do get some lower ridership numbers than we do in the what I'll call the standard forecast. So our previous number was 143,000. This we're looking at 130,000. So that's about a 9% decrease due to that decrease in travel. It also means because there was less travel on the system to begin with, there was less congestion to begin with. We all remember 2021. It was nice and uncongested. And so there was less congestion for BRT to remove. So that is our first scenario.
And
yeah.
you were saying that, that people staying at home, there are more people now going back to work.
There are
So
people.
has that been worked in? I didn't quite understand.
It has not fully been worked in. And again, I think the key thing here to stress is this is a 2045 forecast. So what we're looking at here is in 2045, are telework levels back to where they were during the pandemic, not necessarily because of a pandemic, just because technology allows it and society evolves in that way a little bit. We don't know how that will play out, but this will give us that range. The second scenario we looked at on the next page was our BRT-oriented land use. And what we wanted to look at here is, could we take the jurisdictional land use plans that each of the jurisdictions has for population and employment growth between 2030 and 2045, and could we allocate more of that to be close to the proposed BRT stations, and how might that impact ridership. What we set some fairly strict rules for ourselves. For example, we didn't move proposed population or employment growth across jurisdictional boundaries. So the 2045 total residents in Loudoun County remains the same. We did not move them into Fairfax. Totals for the city of Manassas also stay the same. And we also didn't take projected growth from other high capacity transit that exists or is planned in the region. So we are not pulling, TOD out of metro rail station areas to put it near the BRT. We're not robbing Metro to pay BRT. That's not what we're doing with this. Because of those rules, we did see some uptick in ridership on the BRT. It really does vary across the region. We've got some jurisdictions that already have most of their land use either adjacent to metro rail stations. I'll talk about Arlington and Alexandria in particular, or the vast majority of Arlington, if you look at that map, ends up being within a half mile of a BRT station. So there's not a lot more you can do there. But in some of the outer jurisdictions where there is that possibility, you do see a more significant shift. But on average, it's about a 1.5% increase. So not huge, but significant nonetheless. The third scenario that we looked at was a little more pie in the sky, as it were. And we looked at a set of incentives, both positive and negative, so incentives and pricing that might help encourage people to use transit as a whole and the BRT specifically. Again, this is something we looked at as part of the last transaction, but the key assumptions there are pricing on all roads in Northern Virginia, so VMT pricing, with some discounts for lower income folks to make sure that we align with those equity considerations. But there's also increase in parking costs across the region, both for like all day parking and for shorter hourly parking. We removed transit fares, so free transit to encourage that. And there were also some incentives put in to help shift travel time to encourage people to shift their trips out of the peak periods if they could when we have the most congestion. I will say, and you will see this, the incentives and the pricing combined with that BRT system really encourages the use of transit. We see more than 200,000 trips shift from driving to transit in that scenario. It's a significant increase in transit use and in BRT boardings, 70% higher than we would see without those incentives. Now, these incentives were set at a certain level. That number could change depending on what level you put in there. But it does have really significant impacts, and that trickles down to huge emissions reduction, VMT reduction, all of those other things that happen when you pull all of those cars off the road. The next slide is just really a summary of what I already just said. So you can see these are our average daily riders at the system level. That gray bar off to the left is that standard forecast that we talked about in the last section, and then those differences across those scenarios. Questions? Yeah, okay. And last, as promised, we wanted to talk about a little bit about the upcoming stakeholder and community engagement that is planned for April and May. And so this is going to be our phase 3, as we talked about, and we are focused here on two things, One is education and awareness. Not everybody is familiar with BRT. I'm as shocked as you are. But starting that educational process, explaining to people what it is, how it might benefit them and their community is a big focus of this outreach. And then also to make sure we're getting feedback on the draft plan, the routes, the ideas that we're talking about in here. And so really soliciting that input both from current transit riders, but also folks who might be in that group of people that we're trying to shift with the implementation of that system. Some specifics around the schedule. March is almost over, so we have already conducted a second round of focus groups with various members of the public. We heard some really fascinating things that are really helping us hone our messaging around this. So part of this was people aren't great at reading maps, so let's make sure we have them really clear how we talk about the benefits of BRT, really being able to hone that message. So those were really helpful. And as I mentioned, we are working on updating, creating the draft plan and the documents that will be part of that public package. We are also in the process of creating that online public comment questionnaire, which will be available both at our in-person events and just online for anyone who's interested to be able to comment on the plan and provide specific comments about routes or things they like, things they don't. And we are looking at launching to the public on April 16th, open until the middle of May through May 18th. That will be our public comment period. During May in particular, we will be holding, I believe it's 10 pop-ups and open houses at locations across the region. I believe most of those are finalists, and we can share those if folks are interested. But really focused on places where we can talk to the public, talk to folks who might ordinarily not be involved in a public participation process. And then we want to make sure we go through all of those comments we get and compile them in May. We are planning for an authority work session in June to review what we heard and gather additional feedback from authority members. We are hoping that we can make any updates that are necessary and get that plan approved in July. And that's all I have.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay, so we are now on the NVTA 5-year strategic plan update. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for that presentation.
Okay, good evening, Mail Covert, members of the PCAC. I'm Amanda Sink, the Project Delivery and Grants Manager at NVTA and also Tech Guru. And I have the wonderful opportunity of leading NVTA's update for the strategic plan. Okay, next slide. Brief overview of what I'll be going through, give quick background of our first strategic plan. I'll go over the outline of our update to our strategic plan, the draft vision, mission, core values, and goals for the strategic plan, the timeline that we're going to take, and then we'll just have a little recap discussion of what I presented. So next slide. NVTA adopted its first strategic plan on November 9th in 2017. And this plan kind of outlined what NVTA wanted to be when it grew up. So it outlined a vision statement, which I have in the packet, and it's listed on the screen here. It's pretty long, so I won't read through it. And it also outlined 4 strategic goals of regional prosperity, mobility, innovation, and funding. Throughout the years, we provided updates on the progress that NVTA had on accomplishing those goals. We did that in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And then finally, last year in September, we briefed the authority the closeout plan of this, where we highlighted all that NVTA accomplished from 2017. That's posted on our website. I encourage you to look through it because NVTA did a lot from 2017 to now. And that closeout plan really kind of closed out this 2017 plan and started us going into our next update. So the next slide, we have our outline of our 2025 5-year strategic plan. So this plan is going to outline what we want to be in the next 5 years from 2025 to 2030. And our overarching strategy is going to be to maintain and enhance the performance of NVTA's primary responsibilities while also addressing those urgent and unmet regional transportation needs of what we can do to advance this region. And the structure that our 5-year strategic plan is going to take is broken out in this lovely pyramid. We have the top there, the vision, mission, and core values, because that's really setting the North Star of where we want to go. Underneath that, we'll have goals, which is what we want to accomplish within those 5 years. We'll have strategies of how we're going to accomplish those goals, and then metrics so we can continue to measure our progress. Next slide. So we'll start off with the draft NVTA vision statement. And this might look familiar to you because this was adopted through our update to transaction. So this is transaction vision statement. But as a vision statement really sets an aspirational long-term goal of what NVTA wants to do, we felt that this vision statement really encapsulated that. Over the past years, NVTA has been using this vision statement as NVTA's vision statement. We're just kind of solidifying that this, in fact, is NVTA's vision statement through this update of the strategic plan. Next slide. Then we have our mission statement. And a mission statement defines the organization's purpose and kind of how we execute to get to that vision. So the vision statement or the mission statement, we kind of use a lot in outreach to kind of concisely say what NVTA does, kind of think of an about us section. And we're defining here that our mission is to plan, fund, and advance multimodal transportation solutions that reduce congestion in Northern Virginia. And next slide. Then we have our core values, which also might look familiar because we incorporated this in transaction update. These are the core values we identified there. And again, we felt that these were really good core values of how we want to achieve our vision and mission. We want to be equitable, we want to be safe, and we want to be sustainable. So that you can see here is where we're setting the stage on that top pyramid: vision, mission, core values. Next slide. Then we have the draft goals. And this is the meat and potatoes of the strategic plan, because this is what we want to achieve in the next 5 years. And we've kept with the theme of identifying 4 goals. The first one is to lead the region's transportation initiatives. We want to affirm that NVTA is the regional leader to develop and advance multimodal transportation solutions. Things like the PDP BRT are going to fall underneath this goal. Second, we have maximized public benefit through project selection and delivery. Last year in the adoption of the budget, the authority really charged NVTA with looking into project delivery and what NVTA can do to advance projects to get them online. So this goal is really kind of affirming that we want to take, that we're going to continue transparent project selection through our 6-year program update, as well as increase project sponsor accountability and coordination to get those timely delivery of projects. Third, we have enhanced regional planning through technical assistance and data-driven information. NVTA has developed in-house capabilities for modeling and data analytics, and we want to continue to do that and enhance to provide the regional insight to support informed decision-making, through data analytics. And then fourth, because we are a funding entity and we get money, we really should have a goal that's going to solidify that we're going to continue to safeguard and diversify NVTA's revenue sources. Those are our 4 goals. Next slide. The timeline that we're going to take to update this 5-year strategic plan, we are going to brief the authority. They're going to get their first look at the draft vision, mission, core values, and goal statement in April. Then we're going to take it back to them in May so they can actually take action on adopting those. And then once they take action on that, we can really start working into getting into strategies and metrics that fall underneath those goals. And we're going to do that throughout the summer with finally anticipated adoption in fall to update this entire strategic plan. And then this last slide here, I have a recap where you can see everything on one page. You have that vision, mission, core values, setting that top pyramid, our North Star, and then our 4 strategic goals that we'll accomplish in the next 5 years. And with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, that's fantastic. I love your energy. Okay. You woke us all up. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Yes.
I'm new, so again, forgive me. What role have the jurisdictions played in this, and what role do you anticipate they will play? Are they going to be helping to co-develop this? How is this going to work?
When we adopted the first strategic plan, the authority had work sessions and they were briefing the RJAC, which is our staff level of the jurisdiction's input. We're also going to continue to brief the RJAC. We actually meet tomorrow, and they're going to be getting this same briefing right before the authority. So pretty much we have all of our committees, which you all are made up of jurisdictions, and we have the RJAC, the staff level. They're made up of the jurisdictions to give that input. So we're going to take that all in and then go to the authority. So we are taking that input.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, yes, Supervisor.
On the first strategic plan goal, the regional leadership, is there a statutory basis for that assertion? Obviously, there are other entities that are involved in advancing multimodal transportation solutions. NVTA certainly the biggest in terms of dollars and impact, probably, at least in terms of new projects. But I'm just kind of curious, given how careful we are to stay within our statutory framework, has the General Assembly said who is the regional leader to develop and advance multimodal
Well,
transportation?
and I would say we continue to collaborate, but there are a lot of things that the law charges us to do that we just don't do, to be honest. We can toll, but we don't. We're supposed to have oversight of mass transit, but we try to make sure we're coordinating with what other jurisdictions, of course, and other agencies. But we are supposed to set regional transportation priorities. That is explicitly in the code. So when we say that we're regional leaders, because the law tells us that we are to set regional transportation
It's
priorities.
implicit in the code.
Yes.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Okay, we are moving on to NVTA update.
Or the project.
Oh, I'm
Status.
sorry. We really are only on project status update.
Well, you're good. I just wanted to provide a quick, switching my hat back to the delivery and grants manager, which is the role that was created with the authority's focus on project delivery. We monthly provide updates on NVTA's project status in the CEO report that goes to the authority, and we post also on our website. So what I have here is a snippet of what would have been incorporated in the March authority packet and is also online. So if you want to scroll to the next slide. What we have here, and you can see in your packet, is that we have identified classifications of our SPAs as our standard project agreement. So NVTA has funded 139 unique projects, but we have 185 SPAs that are related to those projects because those are each individual contracts. As we have funding programs and projects maybe come back for different phases, that creates a new SPA. So we're basically classifying where we are with all of those SPAs. On the right-hand side, I have listed kind of the life cycle of the SPA, how it first gets adopted. That's the green text that the authority takes action and approves the funding program. Then we have that we appropriate money to that SPA. Then the SPA is actually executed, that the authority signs and the jurisdiction signs this contract to get the project. Then we have when the SPA kind of closes out. So it's all done spending NVTA money. So we close out the SPA, and then finally the project finishes. The second chart on the bottom there is my personal favorite as the project delivery grants manager, because this is kind of an insight into project delivery. What you see here is we have our funding programs on the x-axis, and what you have is from basically a moment in time. So on the left-hand side, you have our first funding program, fiscal year 2014. And on the right-hand side, you have our most recent funding program, fiscal years 24 through 29. And then you have the classifications of the SPA throughout those funding programs. And what you should see is that on the left-hand side, most of these are categorized in maroon and blue because the SPA is closed out and the project is either complete or it's still ongoing, but it's getting there. As you can see, the blue bar is starting to get higher and higher in 2014. Just like on the right-hand side, you'll see with our fiscal year 2024 through 29 funding program, all of those are green. They've been approved, but we haven't given money yet. That's because NVTA funds out years. So that program we funded for fiscal years 28 and 29. We are not in fiscal years 28 or 29 yet. So we would not expect these projects to need the money yet. They didn't apply for it. They applied for it in fiscal years 28 and 29. And right in the middle of the chart is where you start seeing some areas where we need to start focusing on project delivery. Okay, next page. On this chart, we recognize that NVTA, what we actually approved, $3.8 billion, and also what NVTA has reimbursed. Now, this is as of March 4th, but I would like to note that as of mid-March, we have reimbursed $1 billion of 70% regional revenue funds to projects. So just a little update from when we took this snapshot. The top chart basically shows the same classifications, but in dollar amounts. So we have what we approved for those funding programs and kind of the breakdown of classifications by money in that sense. And at the bottom chart, we have the approved funding amount versus the actual reimbursed amount. And at the bottom of that chart, I kind of have a note here because in addition to funding out years, if let's say in the fiscal year 2018 to 2023 funding program, those were allocating funds, that's our first 6-year program, all the way through fiscal years 23. But a lot of those projects, while they're starting to draw down money, they might not be finished using it until 2029. So we don't expect to see our full reimbursed amount right now because the projects take time and they're going to continue to draw down NVTA money. Our funding programs are when they're going to start doing that. Okay, next page. We always highlight monthly public information meetings for the public as well as any milestone events. So if you have groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, we like to show the progress of projects there. Okay, next page. Then we have substantive project status updates. And one of the requirements of the SPA is that all project sponsors give us an update on where the projects are monthly. Now, as I noted, we have 185 SPAs, about 70 of them are active right now. So we're not going to print all of those project updates. In this packet, you get a big book. What we do is we highlight substantive project updates. So if there's a major engineering or phase advancement, completion date type things, this is what we highlight for the main projects each month. So you can see things like the art operations and maintenance facility, they're fully moved in. So at this monthly update, so we highlighted that for them. Okay, next slide. In this current report, this is not what we have each month, but we have the fiscal year 26 appropriations because going to the authority in April through our budget process is the appropriations to projects. So that's all going to be wrapped up in the budget. But what we wanted to show here is where those projects are because we don't give that project breakout in the budget. We show the numbers. So on this, we kind of wanted to show that some of these projects have already advanced. You know, a lot of these projects have multiple funding sources. They might have been started or moving through the NVTA phase that we're funding, maybe construction. So they are already through design and right of way. So we're just kind of showing where the projects are when they're asking for our money. And then the last slide here is the naughty list. This is the flag projects. As it is a requirement of the SPA for project sponsors to give us updates monthly. What we flag here is if we haven't heard from a project in more than 3 consecutive months. So hopefully we are actually going through the monthly status updates right now.
Good thing I showed up.
We're going through the monthly status updates right now because they were due last Friday and we got some couple trickling in. So we're hoping to get, you know, these cleared up next month. And then at the bottom here, we have no response received. Those are that we just did not get any update. Not as high priority that they've gone so long. Maybe they just kind of forgot that month, but we do note it because it is a requirement for monthly updates. And last thing I'll note is all of this project information is updated real time by both NVTA and the project sponsors on novagateway.org. So all of this is shown there. And with that, I will take any questions on this report.
Okay. Questions?
Great charts on there.
Very colorful.
Yes, yes. All right, I think we're good. Thank you so much. Okay, and now we are on the NVTA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. So the authority has a meeting scheduled for Thursday, April the 8th. We will get the 2 presentations that Amanda just gave you on the strategic plan update and project status update. On our consent agenda, we do have the approval of 2 SPAs, as Amanda noted, standard project agreement, one being for the city of Fairfax, the Germantown Road, Route 29 intersection improvement, and the other, the Rolling Road widening from Hunter Village Drive to Old Keene Road. Then we have some CMAQ RSTP recommendations for fiscal year 2031. It is that time of year again. We make the recommendation to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. They are the decision-making entity for CMAQ and RSTP. We do have some action items, and the big action items for this meeting is adoption of the 3 budgets. As you all are maybe aware or are aware, we have 3 budgets. We have the 70% budget, the 30%, which goes back to you, and then the operating budget. We don't spend a lot of time on the 70 and 30% because the numbers are what they are. The authority adopts them, and then we continue to remit the 30% to the jurisdictions who met the requirement. To date, and I just want to say to date, since the beginning of HB 2313, all localities have met the requirements, the certification requirements to receive their 30%. That makes me happy. I hope it makes you happy, because if that is not the case, that money goes into the 70% pot for that year, and it is forfeited for the locality. And then we have the operating budget that we will be seeking adoption. The other thing of note on that agenda is the call for regional transportation projects for the fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2031 6-year program. Now, I say 2026, in reality, we're adding 2 years, fiscal years 30 and 31. So we will open the call for projects. That funding program, fast forward a year, we will be looking at a July of next year adoption. The last thing I want to know, you may have seen this, I think it came out today, but the Northern Virginia 6-year program public meeting that will be held by the secretary, this VDOT, is the same night as the May authority meeting. We are meeting Thursday, May 8th. Their meeting is Thursday, May 8th. Our meeting is at 7 p.m. Their meeting is at 5 p.m. We will see how that all works out, but we've been meeting the second Thursday of the month for 20-something years now, so it's kind of hard to get, any changes. But I did want to note that because that was publicized today. And Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Okay, excellent. Any questions for Ms. Bachman? Okay. All right. All right. Any other news or any concerns anybody has? Michelle? Okay, I think that concludes the meeting.
Thank
Your
you.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Okay. Yeah. Move things along.